A harsh metallic slam rang through the shelter as the gray and white German shepherd hurled himself at the kennel door. Moments earlier, he had snapped at an officer. Euthanasia was scheduled for morning. At that moment, an old pickup truck rolled into the icy lot and went silent. Jacob Miller, a former K9 handler, stepped out, stunned, breath shallow. His 15-year-old twin sons, Evan and Ethan, followed quietly. He didn't yell, didn't move closer. He just stood there, staring at the dog, not with fear, but with recognition. It was the same look Ranger had given him 10 seconds before the blast in Kandahar. Not aggression, not madness, a soldier, waiting for an order that would never come. Please support us by subscribing to the channel. The winter air in Bozeman, Montana hung heavy and pale, as if the sky struggled to breathe through its own veil of snow. Inside the county animal shelter, the fluorescent lights flickered weakly, throwing cold shadows on the disinfected concrete floor that smelled of metal, fur, and something unseen, like fear that once had a name. At the far end of the hallway, a large German shepherd hurled himself again and again into the steel kennel door. He didn't bark, not once. His body slammed with a dull metallic thud, followed by silence. His tag said, Echo, 7 years old, though his hollow amber eyes looked older, older than time itself. His fur was gray and white, uneven, worn at the edges like a veteran's tattered uniform. But it wasn't his coat that betrayed him. It was his posture. Ears pressed flat, body trembling, breathing sharp and shallow. But his gaze was not on people, nor the walls. He was watching the sky through a small, barred window, not looking at it, checking it, as if waiting. Not for danger on the ground, but for something that once fell from above. 15-year-old Evan Miller stood silently, studying him. Tall, lean, with quiet brown eyes, he had a way of seeing things without staring. His dark blonde hair brushed lightly across his forehead, and his red plaid jacket, worn, not fashionable, made him look like winter trying to grow roots. He didn't speak yet. He just watched. Beside him stood his twin brother, Ethan Miller. Same jacket, same age, but different gravity. Evan observed. Ethan interpreted. Slightly broader shoulders, sharper eyes, tense in ways he didn't understand. He scanned Echo's movements, not with fear, but with curiosity, like someone looking not for answers, but for patterns. Their father, Jacob Miller, a 58-year-old former K9 handler, walked closer. Tall, broad-framed, with a beard streaked in steel gray and silver, his presence didn't fill the room. It grounded it. His face was carved by wind and war, its lines deepened not by age, but by memory. He carried that strange kind of patience only men who've walked too close to death ever learn, the kind that doesn't fear silence. Echo slammed the bars once more, but then he stopped. He didn't pant, didn't snarl. His ears flicked, not forward, but back, as if listening not to the room, but to something no one else could hear. Evan whispered, almost to himself, "He's not trying to get out. He's trying to get away." Ethan frowned, watching Echo's eyes tilt upward again. "He's not watching us. He's watching the sky." A pause, like he's waiting for something to fall. Jacob did not look surprised. He didn't even flinch. His voice came low, steady, not as a guess, but as a confirmation. "That's not fear," he said softly. "That's memory." The twins turned to him. Jacob's eyes remained fixed on Echo, quiet, knowing, not shocked, only recognizing. Then in English, clear as winter air, "That dog was a soldier." And in that instant, Echo stopped moving. He didn't retreat. He didn't step forward. He simply turned his head, slow, deliberate, and looked at the twins, Not at their faces, not their jackets, not their shoes. He looked through them. A stare that wasn't animal, wasn't begging, wasn't warning. It was the look of someone trying to recognize something they had no words for. Evan's voice trembled. It's like he's met us before. Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep in that second, something eerie happened. Echo's tail didn't move. His body didn't relax, but his gaze softened. Not to trust, not to fear, but to wait. Wait. For something unspoken, something buried, something long lost. No one said a word. But outside, the snowfall suddenly stopped, as if winter itself held its breath. Echo slowly lifted his head, not toward them, not toward the door, but toward the sky, like he was listening to a command only he could hear. And somehow, in that fragile silence, all three Millers felt it. This was not where the story ended. It was where it began. That night, the Miller cabin sat tucked against the quiet pines, their branches heavy with snow, bending like ancient shoulders carrying too many winters. The living room glowed with the soft amber light of the old stone fireplace, where logs cracked gently like distant echoes of thunder, familiar, but far away enough to feel safe. Jacob sat in his worn leather armchair, his posture relaxed but never careless. His broad shoulders, draped in a faded green sweater, held an odd tension like a man who rested but never quite forgot how to stand guard. His eyes, tired and softened by flame light, reflected something younger, memories untouched by time yet never truly gone. Evan sat cross-legged on the rug, quietly tracing patterns in the grain of the wooden floor with his finger. He looked thoughtful, distant, not confused, but awakening. Ethan sat beside him, elbows on his knees, staring into the fire as though trying to decode its language. Their red plaid jackets hung on the back of two wooden chairs, still holding the faint smells of shelter disinfectant, cold fur, and something else, something like sorrow in motion. Jacob began to speak, not like a teacher lecturing, but like a man remembering. They don't tell stories, he said quietly. Not the way we do. They don't write them down. They don't try to make sense of them. They just carry them. He looked toward the small window, where the night sky shimmered with stars. War dogs don't fear people. They don't fear pain. They fear what they remember. He leaned forward, hands clasped, voice low and steady. Some dogs were trained to attack, but others were trained to feel, to sense what's coming before we even know it's coming, to notice what humans ignore. He paused. Echo is one of those dogs. He doesn't wait for danger in front of him. He waits for danger above him. Evan and Ethan shared a glance, recalling that haunting image. Echo, still and silent, gazing at the ceiling through the bars as if listening for falling skies. Snow had stopped falling when he looked, as though he had asked it to. Jacob continued, softer now. I had a partner once, a shepherd named Ranger. He wasn't my dog. He smiled faintly. But he chose me anyway. His voice wavered, not breaking, but bending under something old and heavy. He didn't protect me by fighting. He protected me by knowing when to be still, when to listen, when to show that he was afraid, so I would know when it was real. His eyes glistened, though no tears fell. He didn't bark at danger. He respected it. Silence settled, not empty, but full of things that didn't need to be said. The next morning, the sky was pale and brittle, sunlight filtering through thin stretches of cloud like faded silver. The twins followed their father to the county shelter, but this time, Jacob didn't step inside the building. He stood at the entrance, handing each boy a paper cup of, coffee, steam drifting like morning breath into the cold air. "You won't help him by speaking," Jacob said quietly. "You help him by being still enough to hear what he's saying without words." He nodded toward the entrance. "Go sit with him. Not to tame him, not to fix him. Just to let him know you're not afraid to sit with him." Inside, they met Meredith Lang, the young shelter veterinary technician. She was in her late 20s, slender, with a tall frame and calm posture. Her long dark auburn hair was tied into a loose braid, a few strands escaping to frame a kind but tired freckled face. She wore soft gray scrubs and a faded denim jacket, and her warm hazel-green eyes held both exhaustion and compassion. A person tired from caring too deeply, but not yet willing to stop. She greeted the boys with a gentle nod. "You're back," she said softly, glancing curiously at their matching jackets. "He hasn't barked once since yesterday, just listens." She hesitated, then added, "Almost like he's waiting." They followed her to Echo's kennel. The dog stood still, not pacing, not slamming, just watching. The moment he saw them, his head tilted ever so slightly, not toward them but toward something behind them, something invisible, maybe something remembered. Without speaking, the boys sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, about 10 feet from the cage. Echo did not approach, but he did not retreat either. He turned his head, just enough to see them both at once. Evan felt something unspoken settle in the room, like a truce that no one announced, but everyone understood. Ethan felt something stranger, like the dog wasn't studying them physically, but measuring their calm. They said nothing. They just sat there, like their father did once, next to a different German shepherd, in a different kind of war. Just before they left, Echo looked away from the sky, not down, not forward, but directly at them. His ears lifted, not in aggression, but like a soldier responding to something he almost remembered. A command without words, a memory without voice. And for the first time, Echo did not feel alone in that room. Morning in Bozeman broke pale and brittle, with sunlight faintly bleeding across the snow like silver seeping through cracks of glass. The shelter was quiet, still recovering from the cold night, and the hallways felt more like old echoes than living space. Evan and Ethan arrived without their father this time, their boots leaving soft tracks through the morning frost. They weren't nervous, but something inside felt different, as though they weren't just visiting Echo anymore, but returning to something they now belonged to. Inside, Echo was not pacing. Instead, he stood near the back of the kennel, body still taut, ears slightly tilted, watchful but not frantic. He held himself like a soldier standing guard after the battle, alert but alive. His fur looked cleaner now. Meredith had managed to wipe away some of the dried dirt and rust-colored stains. The gray and white of his coat shimmered gently under the pale light, and though he still looked thin, he no longer looked lost. Echo noticed the boys before they spoke. He didn't charge. He didn't retreat. Instead, he walked, slowly, deliberately, to the front of the kennel, stopping 3 feet away from them. It was the closest he had ever willingly come. Meredith watched from nearby, clipboard in hand. Today, she wore a heavy brown winter coat over her scrubs, and her hair, usually neatly braided, had strands falling loose, softening her tired but hopeful expression. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed every movement. Hers was the quiet faith of someone who had seen too many last chances. Ethan pulled out a small notebook, worn and soft at the edges. It wasn't his notebook, it was their father's, with yellowed pages covered in faded ink and smudged annotations. German K9 commands, diagrams, and sparse notes Jacob had never explained. Ethan flipped through it, hands steady but hesitant. Echo's ears flicked. Not forward, not back. Listening. Evan whispered, "I don't think we're here to train him." "I know," Ethan murmured, eyes locked on Echo. "We're here to help him remember." The kennel was silent, except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights and Echo's deep, tremoring breath. Ethan inhaled slowly, steadying his voice the way he had seen Jacob do, calm, low, not forcing anything. He spoke one word. "Sits." It wasn't a command, not a signal. It sounded more like a memory being spoken aloud. And Echo stopped. His muscles tensed, not in fear, but in recognition. Something flickered across his amber eyes. Not obedience, not submission, but something deeper. Something older. His ears slowly rose, and for the first time they stood forward, not with aggression, but with clarity. Then, slowly, achingly slowly, Echo lowered himself into a sitting position. He did not look at the sky. He looked at the floor. He looked like a soldier remembering he wasn't at war anymore. Evan's heart pounded. That wasn't training. That was remembering, Ethan said quietly, like a word that used to belong to him. Meredith exhaled softly. "Dogs don't just obey commands," she said, voice low. "Sometimes they answer them." Echo didn't break eye contact. His breathing slowed, no longer sharp and erratic, but deep, steady, almost peaceful. His body trembled, not in panic, but like someone waking from a long, cold sleep. For just a second, his head lowered, not in fear, not in submission, but in something that looked almost like relief. Not to escape, not to react, but to rest. And that was the moment he stopped looking for threats from above. He began searching for safety below. A memory, once buried beneath thunder and orders and loss, stirred awake. Not every soldier remembers how to fight. Some remember how to come home. The blizzard came without mercy, cloaking Bozeman in thick white silence, except for the echoing booms of thunder that did not sound like thunder at all, more like distant artillery, rolling across the sky in slow, deliberate waves. Inside the shelter, the lights flickered, dim and unsteady, and the heavy wind rattled the metal doors like trapped memories. Echo was not pacing. He was trembling. But it was not fear of the storm. It was recognition, triggered by a sound he had spent his whole life trying to forget. The rumble of thunder cracked again, sharper, meaner, and Echo flinched. Not from the storm, but from Kandahar, Helmand. Somewhere a soldier once whispered, "Stay low," before the ground exploded. Nobody saw him push the muzzle aside. Nobody saw when he forced the latch loose. Nobody knew when he slipped through the gap beneath the side kennel door, silent as a shadow that remembered where to hide. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving only a brutal stillness. Snow lay deep, untouched except for the scattered paw prints leading north. Meredith's voice trembled when she called Jacob. "He's gone." He ran toward the mountains. Jacob didn't ask why. He just nodded, grabbed his worn brown coat, and told his sons to dress warm. The woods near Hyalite Canyon were silent and white, except for the distant sound of crackling ice and buried streams whispering under snow. Evan and Ethan followed their father through the drifts, boots sinking deep, breath clouding before them. Ethan carried a small backpack, water, gauze, rope, and Jacob's notebook. Evan carried no gear, only an unshakable sense that Echo was not lost. Just hiding, not from them, but from something older, something he thought might still be falling from the sky. The mountains rose ahead, sharp, jagged, like broken teeth gnawing at the clouds. Beneath them, the old abandoned quarry sat like a scar on the land, a place of rusted machinery, crumbling rock walls, and deep narrow fissures carved by time and water. It wasn't hard to find the tracks. They were deep, erratic, and at some points smeared with blood. Jacob stopped at the mouth of a rock crevice, breathing slowly. He didn't call. He didn't shout. He simply said, quietly, he didn't run to escape. He ran to survive the memory. Evan was the first to crawl between the rocks. His breath caught as he saw Echo, wedged between stone walls, his hind leg trapped under a shattered slab, panting hard, eyes wide, wild, not with aggression or fear, but something far lonelier. Resignation. Not fighting, not barking. Just bracing for the next explosion. Snow clung to his fur, his muzzle gray with age and ice. His paws were scraped raw. One ear was bleeding. But his eyes, they still listened to the sky. Ethan whispered, "He still thinks it's falling." Evan didn't approach. He didn't speak. He just sat down in the snow, cross-legged, palms open on the ice, close enough to be seen, far enough to not be a threat. He waited, like Echo had waited once. Ethan joined him, placing one hand gently, slowly, near Echo's side of the crevice, where Echo could see it. They didn't say, "Come here." They said something quieter, without words. "You don't have to fight." Echo's chest was heaving. His ears flickered. His eyes were locked, not on the sky now, but on the ground, on their hands. Evan finally spoke, softly, almost like a memory Echo had lost. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." Nothing moved. Then, slowly, Echo lowered his head, not in submission, not in fear, but like someone finally allowed to rest. He pressed his head, not to Evan, but to Ethan's open hand, a quiet, trembling surrender. Not surrender to men, not surrender to orders, but surrender to trust. Jacob watched in silence. In Echo's trembling movement, he didn't see weakness. He saw something war never taught. But every soldier prays to learn. Not how to survive the fight, but how to stop fighting when the war is over. Late winter in Bozeman softened like a memory, learning how to breathe again. The snow no longer fell in sharp spears, but drifted gently, like it had finally remembered how to land softly. The Miller cabin, once just a structure of wood and stone, now felt different. Not because it had changed, but because something inside it had stayed. Under the wide wooden porch, where wind once howled through empty space, now lay a gray and white German shepherd. Echo. Not inside a cage, not tied to anything, just resting, choosing to stay. His fur had grown thicker, white strands threading through smoky gray like winter learning to heal itself. His eyes, once wide and restless, no longer scanned the sky for falling threat. Instead, they quietly followed the twins, Evan and Ethan, as they knelt in the snowy yard, working with another dog. Not a soldier, not broken. Just a young shelter mutt named Scout, a lanky, cinnamon-colored mixed breed with floppy ears and a habit of tripping over his own paws. Scout was not traumatized, not damaged, just young and afraid of being alone. Evan sat cross-legged in the snow, offering silent presence. No commands, no coaxing. Ethan held the old notebook, Jacob's notebook, but never opened it. He set it down, realizing for the first time that they no longer needed the words inside it. What they'd learned was no longer written on paper. It was learned in quiet, in stillness, in showing up. From the porch, Echo watched. He didn't react. He didn't intervene. He simply observed, with a calmness that didn't feel like submission, but like understanding. Jacob stepped outside, leaning against the porch pillar. He wore his worn olive-green military coat, faded and frayed at the cuffs, with creases that told more stories than any photograph could. His beard was more silver than gray now, and his eyes, weathered but alive, held a kind of peace that didn't come from forgetting, but from accepting. The door creaked softly, and Mara Miller, the boy's mother, stepped outside carrying 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. She was a slender woman in her late 40s, with chestnut hair tied loosely over her shoulder, pale skin touched by cold wind, and soft hazel eyes shaped by both worry and quiet resilience. She wasn't a soldier, had never worn a uniform, but she had carried something too. The weight of waiting, of watching others heal in their own time. Her voice was gentle, but not fragile. "He stayed," she whispered, glancing toward Echo. "Not because we kept him, but because he decided he wasn't alone anymore." Jacob nodded. That's all they ever want. Not walls, not orders. His voice softened. Just someone who won't leave. Down in the yard, Scout trembled, but it wasn't panic. Just uncertainty, like a child not yet sure if silence could be safe. Ethan didn't call him over. Evan didn't pat the ground. They just sat, breathing gently, waiting. Just like Echo had taught them, not with barks, not with tricks, but through stillness. Scout slowly, hesitantly, walked forward, sniffed Evan's hand, then lay down beside him. No treats, no command. Just trust. Echo blinked, slow and calm, and rested his head back on Jacob's old military coat. The coat still smelled of dust, old leather, and storms that no longer frightened him. Not because the storms were gone, but because he had learned there was shelter now, outside the cage, inside connection. Ethan looked up at his father. "Dad, after everything, did we save Echo? Or did Echo save us?" Jacob didn't answer immediately. His gaze moved to Echo, then to Scout, then to his sons, two boys who didn't tame a war dog, but made space for one to lay down his burden. Finally, he spoke, slowly, like snow melting in late winter. "Hearts that have walked through war," he said, voice deep, "don't need to be fixed." He looked at Echo, whose body had loosened into warmth, not tension. "They only need someone who doesn't walk away." Silence fell, not empty, but full. Full of presence, full of belonging. Echo closed his eyes, not to keep danger out, but to rest without fear. Scout slept. The twins didn't speak. There was no need, and under the thin winter sunlight, Echo curled into sleep, not as an abandoned animal, not as a soldier bracing for impact, but simply as a guardian who had finally found his unit. His war didn't end when thunder stopped. It ended when someone stayed. In the quiet stillness of that late winter morning, Echo slept not as a lost animal, but as a soldier finally home. He did not need chains, walls, or commands. He only needed presence, someone who would sit beside him in silence and stay. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with trumpets and angels. Sometimes they come quietly, on four trembling legs, wearing scars instead of wings, not to perform wonders, but to remind us that healing is not always loud. Sometimes it is just the moment a frightened heart finally believes it doesn't have to fight alone anymore. Maybe that's how God works too, not always in burning bushes or parted seas, but in the patience of two boys who didn't give up, in the kindness of a tired shelter worker, in the worn coat of a veteran who still believed that some battles are won without fighting, and perhaps in a war dog who finally stopped looking at the sky because he had found something stronger to believe in right here on the ground. So if you've ever been Echo, haunted by old storms, afraid of noises that others can't hear, waiting for the sky to fall again, may this story remind you. Maybe your miracle isn't something you must search for. Maybe it will come quietly. Maybe it's already here. If you believe in second chances, if you believe some hearts don't need fixing, only someone who won't walk away, then you are already part of that miracle. May God bless every heart that has been through a battle, whether seen or silent. May He grant comfort to those still waiting for their healing, and may He guide us to become people who don't walk away. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, Leave a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. Share this story with someone who may need a quiet miracle. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of loyalty, second chances, and hope. Because somewhere tonight, a heart like echoes is still listening for footsteps that will not bow.